Alexander. Today we are having Tim Fazenbaker, who is running for Congress in Maryland's 2nd District. So hello, Tim. Nice to have you on the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to speak to great patriots like yourself.
Well, thank you. So can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. 41 years old. I am from the heart of this district in basically southeast Baltimore area. And I have 5 kids. I'm a former executive in the mental health field, former musician as well. I was a touring musician. And about a year and a half ago, I decided I've had enough of what was going on. And I decided I'm going to get in this race and I'm going to challenge the opponent, who we call Out of Touch Dutch, Rupersberger. Yeah. And we're going to replace him and we're going to take back the House of Representatives for the people this upcoming election.
Well, that sounds great. So how will you clean up Baltimore when elected?
First thing is we need to make sure we shine light on what's going on here. And thanks to someone like President Trump, who called out the corruption that many here locally knew, he exposed the billions of dollars that were being wasted in Elijah Cummings' district. But it's not just there; it's all over this state. And we have, the first thing to do is to make sure we show exactly what's happening in the money trail and where that money's missing, who these key players are. By doing that, we open up the discussion. We get out the people that shouldn't be in there because they're abusing the power. We bring in real Americans that want to work for the people and that aren't in this field to enrich themselves. That's what has to happen first before we can enact anything else.
Right. Yeah, I was just looking at, they found human feces in some Maryland waterways near Baltimore. So this is a huge problem that I see. So another key question to you, what is your plan for ending homelessness in Baltimore?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As I said, I was a former executive in mental health. Homelessness has a good correlation with mental health issues. And it's not just a Band-Aid that's needed. It's not just finding a place for these people to live. We need to give them the treatment that's necessary so that they can be productive and feel like they're part of society. So we need to make sure we bring back the institutions that we had back in the 70s and 80s, where we had mental health facilities for people to go receive the care they need instead of just going out into the streets. One thing that goes along with that is the addiction and drug problems that go along, because people who have mental health issues tend to have addiction issues or vice versa. And you need to treat it at the root, which is at the mental health aspect. If you just treat and try to stop the drugs and just try to stop homelessness, you're not getting to the real problem, which is the mental health aspect. So I love that question because we need to make sure the mental health aspect is taken care of in order to solve many of the ailments that our society currently deals with today.
Yeah, one of the key things that I see the reason causing this major drug addictions is really big pharma, big pharmaceuticals, because they prescribe opium for many, if you get hurt and various other things like that, when they could give them softer drugs like marijuana. So what is your stance? How are you going to stop big pharma to help protect your people?
First thing is everybody needs to understand or should understand that there's a connection between the lobbyist who donate the money and the candidate who kind of relies on that money. This is an expensive field. My opponent has $2 million, and the average person running for Congress spends $1.7 million. That's not cheap. That's a lot of money. Where's that money coming from? It's coming from usually large corporations and PACs. So that money buys them a lot of power. So we need to make sure that we shine light on that to say, hey, people, everyone understand that this is where a lot of this money comes from. It's not for free. There's something usually attached with that. Now, at the same time, my core belief is that you have the God-given right to do whatever you want with your life, provided that you don't take away that right from another.
Right.
And I bring that up is because, if medical marijuana is something that is helping many people, you have that right to do that. It's a God-given right. It's
Right.
not anyone's right to say, well, you can't do that. And one thing I like to espouse on here a little bit is we have a bill in Maryland called Connor's Courage. It's House Bill 331. And in this bill, medical marijuana is legal in Maryland, but this kid can't take his cannabis drops in school, so he has to be checked out by his parents every day, taken off school grounds to give him the drops, come back to school. I've been one of the first people to stand behind this bill against even many Republicans who are afraid of anything that has anything with marijuana or cannabis in it. But the whole
Right.
premise of this was, you know what, a conservative and a real American understands you have the right to do whatever you want, especially when someone's in need of something like this. And it's much better and safer than getting into hardcore opiates, morphine, anything along those lines.
Exactly. What I was looking at, the reason why the United States enacted these anti-marijuana laws, in a big part was because the UN wanted the United States to do this. So this really brings me to a key question to you. I see that you are running for a Republican, but one of the unfortunate things that I see about most Republicans and most Democrats who get into Congress is that they're taking money from big oil and big pharma. So would you be your own man? Are you getting any money from these people? Would you be holding to them?
Yeah, so I haven't taken any money from any large corporations. Part of the um, part of my makeup was to understand that I'm in this. I'm in this for my children. Like I said, I have 5 kids, and I wanted to teach my kids civic responsibility. But at the same time, I wanted to do what's right for the citizens of my district, my family, your family, everyone. And part of that is understanding that we need to make sure that we're not bought off. And I've had people that would say, "Hey, I'm going to give you a lot of money, and in return, I kind of
Yeah.
know what they want." And I say, "No, that's not what I'm looking for." So what I did when I entered this race, on purpose, I went national, and I started speaking around the country, and I started getting donations from people all over the country, and that was more important to me than having a couple of large donors that control my actions. I'm not in this for the money. I'm not in this for the power. I'm in it for the right reasons. Like many people do, when they get in, they have the right intentions. I think the system corrupts many of them because they get dependent on that money. And that's not what my strategy is. My strategy is to limit the expenses, find innovative ways to reach people, like with social media and programs like yours, so that I don't have to have $2 million in a sense to go after and try to buy votes. No, it's reach the people in innovative ways that where I can get my message across without spending tons of money and being beholden to needing big donors. That's what needs to happen, and that's what we're doing here in our campaign.
So you won't accept any bribes for any reasons.
That's 100% correct. Yes.
Okay, so that is a good thing. So this brings me to my next question. I see the Republican Party getting more corrupt each year, getting closer to the Democrat Party. And one of the things that Republicans continuously vote for, unfortunately, many House members, is they vote for war, especially in the Middle East. Would you vote against having war, and would you vote to get us out of these endless wars in the Middle East?
Yes. So I'm not an interventionist. I am more of I'm a Republican, but let me say I'm an American first. I'm a conservative second, and then a Republican. Now I'm not a party person in a sense because the party is part of what the issue is with this country. It's like two sports teams. If you're a Ravens fan and your friend's a Steelers fan, it's not easy to switch teams. So it's designed on purpose to be this way so that we are in factions or we're balkanized into two groups and we fight against each other. So it's important to understand we're not necessarily a political party affiliate. We need to be Americans first. And part of
Okay.
that, we don't get involved in needless wars. We don't waste our lives of our men and women in this country and our children and people around the world. We stay out of as many foreign interventions as possible, but we must have peace through strength. So I'm for a strong military for the main fact that we don't have to get into war. because if we show that we have the power, many people will not poke us and think that they can get away with things. But we need to avoid needless wars at all costs.
This is my major thing with that, though. I get what you're saying, but we as the United States do have a major power, and that is nuclear weapons. So I really don't see a need to grow our military any more than it is because of our massive debt, number one. And number two is that we already have the weaponry to protect ourselves. No one wants to mess with the country. No one would want to start a war with the United States, being we have these very powerful and destructive weapons.
Now, I can agree with most of what you're saying, but we do see that there are foreign enemies out there right now that hit us with terrorist attacks and things of things of that nature. Now, in a traditional war, you're right. I don't see anybody wanting to step up and challenge us in that fashion. Now, I'm not saying we need to expand our military, but what I'm saying is we need to be as cutting edge as possible so that nobody becomes stronger than us. So it's not necessarily spending more, but it's being very, very on top of what we need to protect ourselves. So I agree with what you're saying. I don't want to waste the money, and I'm glad you brought up the debt because that is a big issue for me as well. But at the same time, I think there's an appropriate amount or appropriate way that we have to fund the military in order so that we don't get involved in these wars. I don't know what that number is, but I think there's a lot of ways that we could streamline this and make it better.
One of the things I think that causes these terrorist attacks is that the United States has gotten into foreign affairs, starting with Osama bin Laden invading Kuwait and we going into Iraq and taking it over. And I think the terrorist attacks are happening for two major reasons. One, we're not securing our border, we're letting these people in, we're allowing them to come in. And number two is that we have invaded their countries. So, what would you do to stop terrorist attacks?
Yeah. So first part of that, with securing our borders, that's essential for any nation. So it's the same thing with states. You know, you have a boundary for a reason, and the laws are pertain to those states. Well, it's the same thing with our nation. We need to make sure that we put Americans first and we protect America by not letting anybody just come through the borders. So yes, that is one way that people come in. There are other ways that they come in and to do nefarious acts. The second part about the invading other countries, yeah, I'm not an interventionist. There are times and places where we need to help and do the right thing by protecting innocent people and innocent lives. But far too often, we have become an intervening a country that gets involved in these things for whatever reason when we really shouldn't be. And that is, we've seen the shift in ideology with many Americans that say, we don't want to get involved in that war. We don't want to lose our lives and other innocent people's lives for a war that we don't really think is necessary. And I'm glad to see that America is moving in that direction because that's how I believe as well. I don't want to go invade other countries or take over. I want to put Americans first, and then we use our might and our goodwill to help other people when possible.
Do you believe that the United States went into the Middle East to take over the oil fields?
I don't know. I mean, when that happens, let's say when we had the first Gulf War, you know, we were told that we were going in there to protect the Kuwaiti people, and yeah, I can see that there. What goes on behind the scenes, I don't know. It's hard for me to speculate. I would like to think that we always have the best intentions, but we know that people are flawed and they will have the wrong intentions sometimes. So I don't have the answer to that specifically, but I will always say that I will always make sure that if we are involved in some kind of conflict, that I get to the bottom of it and make sure that we don't get involved in these things for nefarious reasons, but that we're actually in that for the right reasons to protect the lives of innocent people and Americans first.
So, if you got elected to Congress today, would you pull out all the troops in the Middle East?
That's kind of complicated to say, and I appreciate you asking that question. One, I look at Israel as a strong ally for us. So I want to make sure that our interests are protected there. It's important for America to be aligned with Israel because that is freedom and that to protect the people that are living there as well. I do think there are troops in the Middle East and other parts of the world that really shouldn't be in those places, and it's time to recall those. But we need to do it in a safe way where if we withdraw certain troops right now, immediately, it will cause all kinds of issues. Uh, so we need to make sure if we're going to do this, we do it in a systematic way that is safe for everybody involved. But yes, I would prefer to bring back as many people as possible.
Okay, so this is a major question that has been on my mind. So how will you stop homelessness in Baltimore?
Okay, yeah, great question. So again, it starts with the root of mental health issues. So what we need to do is we make sure that we're addressing the mental health issue, not only with the people that are homeless now, but with the youth, because by the time a youth becomes a teenager, it's usually pretty far along them, and it's harder to treat that person. So we need to address it at a very young age, and we can catch those things in school. When someone's in school, by the time they're in the first, second, third grade, most of the teachers know what's going on. If we can help these people with that, we set them on a better path for life. Second thing is we need to make sure that we have the foundation of strong work and great jobs. And in a place like Maryland, we're not doing as well as the rest of the country because the socialist ideologies that go on in this state really hinder the production and manufacturing type abilities in this state. So a lot of people aren't getting the jobs that they used to have in an area like this. They're having mental health issues. The illegals are coming in, and the MS-13 are coming in. They're bringing the gangs, so that's causing more issues. And people are afraid to live in their neighborhoods. And then, there's all kinds of issues that are leading to this, but they all need to be addressed. And the very first one is with mental health, and then I think the second thing is obviously closing the border and making sure we don't have these illegal gangs and anybody just coming through these borders.
Okay, so do you support red flag gun laws? Because
Yeah.
is that something you support, or are you against them?
No, I'm completely against the red flag laws. So here in Maryland, we have a Republican governor who's he's not a fan of President Trump, and he was, I believe, it was the first person to enact these red flag laws. Now the red flag law is designed in a sense with a noble purpose, but what happens is you still are limiting and infringing upon a person's ability to protect themselves and that Second Amendment right, which is another God-given right. You have the ability to do whatever you want with your life, and that includes protecting yourself and the family. Red flag laws have already been shown right away with, I think his name was Gary Willis, was the first person killed because of this law. He was unjustly accused of being a threat because he was fighting with a distant family member, if I recall correctly. Long story short, he ended up getting killed because he wouldn't turn over his guns. Well, I've seen it with other people as well, where they're unjustly accused. People come in, you can say whatever you want that, hey, my neighbor is a threat to me. They come in,
Yeah.
they take guns. It's the issue is wrong. It's not fair to take away a person's ability to protect themselves. What it has to happen is we need to take the person that actually has real mental health issues, take them off the street, not the gun. You take the person off the street, give them the treatment. That way you're not endangering people with someone who has a real mental health issue out there. But at the same time, you're not endangering an innocent person by taking away their ability to protect themselves. So
But
no, I do not support red flag laws.
okay, that is good, but how does the government know when someone has a mental health problem? How do they know when to take somebody and put them in an institution?
Yeah. So this is as I said, I was a former executive in mental health. Part of the HIPAA laws that most people know what HIPAA is, but there's the privacy of HIPAA, which doesn't allow a doctor to necessarily share that information with other agencies to say, hey, this person really does have mental health issues. There are some that can do certain things, but a HIPAA violation is serious. And if a person and say a medical professional cannot express that, hey, this person does have a mental health issue and is a danger,
Yeah.
and that really limits and endangers many of us. And unfortunately, many times what a physician or anyone in that field will do is they'll prescribe you medication instead of the real treatment, which is actually maybe having you in an institution that can actually address your real needs and not just a band-aid like with medication. That's a lot of what happens in humankind and in
Yeah.
this country is we put band-aids on things and we don't really address it. So we need to look at the HIPAA law and we need to find a way to protect people's privacy, but at the same time protect individuals from having people who have real mental health needs out in public.
So I see that Donald Trump supports red flag gun laws, and he is the head of the Republican Party. So why did you choose to become to run in this race as a Republican and not as an independent?
Another great question. You got some great questions. I'll give you that. So I've always been a Republican, but as I said, I'm American first, conservative second, and then Republican. I would never run as a Democrat first because they are so far to the left. It's opposite. It's the antithesis of what I really believe. I believe in individual freedom versus the tyranny of someone on the left. I wouldn't run as an independent necessarily because in our society, you really only have the two-party system. And I'm not saying that that's the best thing because, as I said before, you have the two parties. It's like two sports teams. You're going to root for one, and you're going to turn a blind eye to some things just because you want to support your party or your team. Getting in as an independent is very, very hard to win. It's very hard. I mean, it's very hard to win as a Republican in a state like Maryland as well. So, in order to make real change, you need to be elected, and the way to do that is that you bring in people into the party that is easiest for you to be aligned with, even if there are differences, and then you modify that party. You make the changes that are needed in that party, and that's what you're seeing as well. You know, Donald Trump is not perfect. There are many things that he's done that I'm not a fan of. There are many things he's done that I really appreciate and very supportive of. And in the very beginning, I was more of a Ted Cruz supporter, and so, but no one's perfect. However, the Republican Party is closer aligned with my belief of individualism than the Democrats, and an independent can go anyway. So, and like I said, it's harder to win as an independent, and if I don't get in office, I can't make the changes as effectively.
So I see that the United States people, the people of America, used to be sovereign in the Wild West. Cowboys were able to own a gun without having to pay a fee and have a permit because that guaranteed freedom.
Yeah.
Would you stop this new tyranny, permits and fees when elected?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I'm for constitutional carry. There should be no fees or any kind of tax on anything to do with the Second Amendment or protecting yourself. Because if one thing I tell people is, okay, if you do that with guns, eventually people will find knives or lasers or whatever it's going to be, and they're going to tax you on that too. It's just another way of controlling their revenue and taking our fees, but it's also a way of trying to hinder a person's ability to protect themselves with that Second Amendment right.
So another question from my friend Jordan Maxwell. Do you know the difference between an American and U.S. citizen?
Okay, well, yeah. So if you're a United States citizen, actually, well, that's a good question. I would assume if you're a United States citizen, you would be also considered, someone that's maybe from Puerto Rico as well, or an American territory. But if you're an American, you would be, I guess, considered part of the continental and the other two states. So I'm not 100% sure if that's correct, but that's how I take that.
Well, the reason why I say this is because with the passing of the 14th Amendment, when I look at it, it says right here, it says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. So this is pretty important because this is when the United States changed from being a constitutional republic to a corporation. Do you believe the United States is now a corporation?
That is a great question as well. I'm loving what you're asking. Yes, I think that America does operate as a corporation many times, and we see the power influences from many. I always tell people if they're against big business, okay, I understand. But what is the biggest business of them all? It's our government, and the government operates like a business. So yeah, I can see the connection that you're saying there. That yeah, we do operate like a corporation, and we need to get back to sovereign rule and our constitutional beginnings.
So will you bring us back to our constitutional beginnings and get rid of this corporation and make everyone sovereign like they used to be?
I would love to, and I would do everything in my power and my position to do that. Obviously, we know the system is huge, but I will do everything I can, just as I'm doing now, to make a difference. And that is something that you always. I tell people this, as I said, you have the God-given right to do whatever you want with your life, provided you don't take away that right from another.
Right.
Every piece of legislation that comes across my desk will be judged by exactly that. What first is it doing to your God-given rights, and then is it taking away a right from another person? Every piece of legislation, I will use that as the basis.
So do you think there will be a new communist revolution in the United States and the United States will become the new Soviet Union?
I don't, but I think we're already facing a communist type revolution, and it's been stirring for the past century. We've seen it. I'm a big history buff, and if you're watching what's going on, you see this gradual move to the left, and now it's accelerating, I believe. But America's foundings are instilled in many of us that we reject the straight movement to communism. But what Nikolai, I'm sorry, was
Tesla?
No, I'm sorry. Nikola Brezhnev in Russia and the Soviet Union said was, we will defeat America from within. So their ultimate goal was, we're going to infiltrate the education system. It will infiltrate your media, things along those lines, so that we will make you a socialist or communist nation in a long haul. I think we're fighting that now. I don't think America will ever go that route. I'm not sure what America will be in 100 years, but I do not think we'll ever be a communist or a full-on socialist nation.
Well, I really think that's because I've just had a recent conversation with my friend Jordan Maxwell, and he was telling me how the USSR means Union of Soviet Socialist Republic.
Yes.
And what are the people on the far left call themselves? They call themselves socialists,
Yes.
like Bernie Sanders and many other things.
Right.
And actually, the people like Lenin were called people who had politics on the far left. And that's what Bernie and many other leftists in the United States are. So I really see this as a communist attack within, as you have said. So how will you stop the coronavirus from coming into Baltimore?
So you got some great questions. So we need to make sure first that the first thing, and this isn't necessarily correlational with what's going on, but we need to make sure that we're not allowing illegals into our nation. And this is another thing that happens. Some of the people on my team are teachers, and they talk about how when someone comes into school and they're bringing tuberculosis because they're not documented and they're not giving their records and their vaccinations to the school. Yet every other kid in there has to go through those things, but this one kid brings it in and puts everybody else at risk. So many teachers have expressed something like that. So we need to make sure that first we're following our own laws and not allowing someone to come into our country unregulated, unchecked, because one, they bring in different diseases, and it could be coronavirus, but it could be tuberculosis, it could be anything along those lines. In terms of the direct connection with coronavirus, or I believe they're calling it something different now. I forget. I saw they changed the name just the other night. There has to be proper screening and things like that. And I don't have a problem with the quarantining of people coming from these areas, because ultimately we need to protect what's going on here. And yeah, if someone's inconvenienced for a week or two and while they're quarantined, I get that. That's taking away their personal freedoms, but at the same time, if they're here unchecked and they are at risk, they're taking away other people's rights at their own freedom, we need to find a way just to be able to check these people before they come in. And they have been doing that, and it hasn't been rampant yet. And I don't think we've had a case in Baltimore,
Yeah.
thankfully, but I can see it coming.
This is something that is really important that I've been thinking of with this coronavirus. The media has been saying how this coronavirus is spreading rapidly. And if it were to come in the United States, I would be very afraid of a forced vaccination, big pharma getting another forced vaccination.
Yeah.
So, do you support vaccinations?
I believe the person has a choice to do what they want with
Okay.
the vaccination. So, now I personally have vaccinated my children, and that was my personal choice along with my wife. However, if a parent or a child doesn't want that vaccination, it is not my right or anyone else's right to make them do that. I believe there are certain vaccinations that are fairly obvious that they are salient and imperative that someone has. The best thing to do is educate. But if they don't want that, you can't force someone to do that. I look at here on the East Coast we have we have some large Amish communities.
Yeah.
The Amish stay within their way of life, and if you're going to go in and you're going to force them to do things our way, that's wrong. And they accept their way of life, and they live completely fine. They don't have many of the issues that other people have, but it's a person's right to choose if they are vaccinated or not, and that's exactly how I believe.
How will you stop crime in Baltimore?
Is that crime?
Crime.
Crime. So in Baltimore, it's rampant, and we had a record-breaking year, and we're going to have another record-breaking year right now. We're ahead of where we were in 2019. The first thing that needs to happen is there needs to be a culture change. There's a culture of violence in Baltimore and in the surrounding areas right now. The reason for that is, one, you have these gangs that are coming in, and many of the people there, they have poor education. So when you have a poor school system, and the people who are dropping out in seventh, eighth, ninth grade, they're turning to a lot of the gangs, and there's a lot of drugs going on. And right away, what happens is you start having gang wars, and you need to put that in check. And it's not just American type gangs. You have the MS-13 coming in here, and they're having the human trafficking and just the brutal killings and initiations that they're doing. You have to attack these gangs right away first, but you do it by changing the culture and education. Outside of that, there needs to be respect. Excuse me. There needs to be some kind of respect for authority. What happens many times is the police, they're not perfect, but the police in general are attacked for being police and policing their own neighborhoods, and it's hard to be a police officer. So what happens many times is that like with Baltimore City, a third of their force they can't hire because nobody wants to work there, and many of the people and the residents that live there, they're not supportive of law enforcement there. And like I said, I get it. Not every officer or every law enforcement person is perfect, but generally we need to have a rule of law. And when we have people breaking the law and they disrespect authority, and then they get into the judicial system, and the judicial system is pushing back people into the communities that really should be rehabilitated in some form, whether it's mental health or it's actually incarceration. There are ways that the judges are just pushing people back into the street, endangering our lives. It needs to be a whole rampant change in the whole system, but it starts with the culture and starts with ending these gangs.
So I think that there is major distrust within Baltimore from the people because they don't trust the police officers, they don't trust the officers. So I don't believe that we would need officers if you could make some sort of public peace officers, like make everyone sovereign and own a weapon. So would you try to bring back trust to the people by making them all sovereign and having their right to liberty, life, and happiness? Because if everyone was able to defend themselves, there would be no need for that distrust or police officers.
You're right. If you have the ability to protect yourself, first of all, crime will go down. We've seen it with other states that have enacted these things. I think there's still, even in the old days, with the Wild West, you still had a sheriff and some deputies. You'll still always need that because there will still be crime, even if people can protect themselves. It's human nature. But you take away a militarized police force, and I think you will have a system of trust by doing so. But you will always have a need for some type of law enforcement. The trust issue is definitely noticeable. I go to parts of Baltimore and they don't trust the police, and the police don't want to go in these neighborhoods. So I think, along with the ability to protect yourself, like I said, the culture change, an understanding of, of authority in a sense, and not being able to just abuse the system will go a long way, and with education as well. I do think there would be benefits to having beat patrol officers. When I was a kid and I lived in Baltimore, we had police that were friendly and they walked around and they were responsible for a few blocks.
Right.
They weren't threats. They were there to work for the people, to make sure that crime didn't happen.
Yeah.
It needs to be. It needs to be proactive. But the police, unfortunately, they're handcuffed. They have to be reactive, and they're not. We've seen the Constitution. We've seen the Supreme Court rule that police aren't there necessarily to protect us. They're there to actually be reactive to a crime after it happens. That's got to change as well. But I do think I thank most of the people that are in law enforcement because they're in it for the right reasons and they are good people.
Well, when I look at the pictures of how law enforcement used to look, like you were saying, look at the Andy Griffith show for one. Now, looking back at that, we now today have SWAT teams. The police are carrying heavy armor. They're not that friendly sheriff anymore. So would you work to demilitarize the police force?
Yeah, I think the police they need to have the ability to handle large situations. But I think there's the press and has this image that they create that the militarization of police and law enforcement has to happen when it doesn't have to happen. So I think we are quick to pull the trigger because everyone's also afraid if we don't do something, then people are sued, or there's going to be people are losing their jobs. But I think it would be best if somehow we had a more peaceful community type policing, like you said with Andy Griffith and Barney Fife. Although Barney was a little out there, but that's another story.
Well, that's great that you want to do that. So this brings me to my next question. Will you, as a Congress member, put the traitors of our country in prison?
Yes. Three things that I said when President Trump became president, that I would judge him on three things: building the wall, tax reform, and lock her up. Now, two of them, we can debate, but two of them are in the process of happening. The third one, locking her up, I would love to see that. I don't believe it's going to happen, but I do think there are things going on right now. We've seen with Attorney General Barr that there could be things. Now, I will be pessimistic and think that, and I'll say that until I see it, I won't believe it. But my goal is if I'm an elected Congress member, even if I'm not, my goal was to make sure that anyone who is a traitor to this nation is held responsible for exactly what they do. And I would love to get in there, uncover the documents, and say, here's the smoking gun, and you're going to be responsible for what you did in endangering our lives.
So we see that many people in our government, including the far left socialists, are aiding and abetting in human trafficking. How will you stop human trafficking in Baltimore?
Yeah, first thing we need to do is shut down the border with this illegal immigration. I support a merit-based immigration, so we're bringing in the best and brightest. When you get the illegals out of here, well, let me say this: when people push for illegal immigration in sanctuary cities and counties, what they're actually doing is also endangering the illegals that are coming here, because we don't know who every illegal person is. So when they are abducted and they're in some human trafficking thing, we don't even know.
Right.
So it happens so many times and nobody knows about it because they're not registered as an American citizen or not on a green card or anything along those lines.
Exactly.
That needs to be addressed. And it's also hurting the Americans as well, but they never talked about how it's actually hurting the illegals that come here.
Right. Yeah, that's actually why I wrote a book, Why Illegal Immigration is Modern Day Slavery. I talked to this Republican kid one time, and he was telling me how he was having illegal aliens working on his dad's farm in California for just free room and board. So it's a massive problem that's going on, and I think it's really because of the money, the free money, because they work for free a lot of times or close to being free.
Yeah, and
Working.
you're right. It is. It's it's an anti-American belief that when Ted Kennedy opened up immigration from in the 1960s, or he was pushing that, I believe it was Ted Kennedy. Their goal was to bring in people that weren't from American values initially. So you had from Central America, some parts of Africa, Middle East, and different parts of the world. And these people weren't going to assimilate as much because they were coming from just different cultures. And we see it now where you have people that don't assimilate to become an American, like 100 years ago when the Irish and Italians were coming. They were treated as as second class for a while, but they were assimilating. Here you have people that are encouraged not to assimilate, and you have two different Americas where you have the shadows where this crime happens and the human trafficking and the gangs, but then you also have the Americans. So now you're building up on purpose, as I was saying with Brezhnev said, you will defeat you from within. That's what they're trying to do. You're trying to replace the American culture and base with a different type of people and culture that are coming here.
So we see a lot of people being banned on the internet, including on platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. We see many people in Baltimore being banned on the internet. So will you stop internet censorship when elected to a congressman?
Yes, and I first announced that I was going to run for Congress at a free speech rally where we were standing up against the censorship in social media and other avenues. And Stop the Hate was part of one of the organizations that were there talking about this. And what I learned was you have a platform like Facebook, or they're either going to be considered a platform like a social media platform, or they're going to be considered journalism. But what they're doing right now is they're considering themselves both. That way, they have the ability to behave the way they do and block you and censor you. The privileges that they are getting, many other companies can't get, and it's wrong. And that's what needs to be addressed as well. Censorship of speech is hate speech, and that is what is the core to what being an American is. You have the ability to say and to do whatever you want,
Right.
regardless whether it hurts someone else's feelings or not.
So will you vote to leave the United Nations?
Yes, easily. The United Nations is an anti-American organization currently, the way it's been run and structured. I think having something like the League of Nations, what used to be, or NATO, or even the United Nations, has benefits, but generally we're seeing more negative than the positives with these types of things.
Right.
So having a collective group to respond to an emergency, like if a war were to break out, some kind of war, like major war, you could have a collective group of countries that come together and put a stop or an end to these types of things. But the United Nations right now is a joke. Um, they do some good things, but generally it's an anti-American type organization.
I really haven't seen them stop any major wars at all. Like
Yeah, they
all
don't.
these, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
do you believe that isolationism is a good thing?
Yeah, I think that any culture has the right to determine what's best for them or whatever they believe. Throughout history, there have been isolationist type countries. I'm not saying I'm an isolationist, but if I think, first of all, with America, it would be best if we focus more on ourselves than what we are doing going all around the world, spreading, our influence, or wasting a lot of our money in other places. We need to have connections with the outer world, I believe. But the first thing is we need to take care of ourselves. So you can call it whatever you want. But, somebody might say that's isolationist type issue. I don't believe so. It's just it's a national issue. It's national, and it's nationalism. You protect yourselves, and then the country and the people decide what kind of interaction with the rest of the world that they want to have. That's how I believe.
So we see Nancy Pelosi kneeling on her knees to the Pope. So we see many politicians across the United States are taking Vatican money. Are you beholden to the Vatican?
No. So Nancy Pelosi is originally from Baltimore. Her family's from here as well. She went to Institute of Notre Dame Catholic school here, and after she made many things that were antithetical to Catholicism, they took down her picture in school, at the same school that's still there. I'm not Catholic. I was raised Catholic, and we see something like with this Pope. First of all, it's you have a person that is the decision maker, and that's almost. I'm not saying Catholicism is tyrannical, but to have one person making most of these decisions is not the way that I live my life. I look at it as individual freedom. This Pope is actually more of a socialist than he is a theologian, and we see it all the time. One thing with saying that walls are immoral, yet the Vatican is surrounded by walls.
Right.
I think most Catholics are great people. I think something with this Pope, though, is completely different than, say, Pope John Paul. You look a little bit younger, so I don't know if you were around when Pope John Paul was alive, but he was a great Pope.
He was.
He stood for the individuals, and he stood for what it meant to be a Christian or a Catholic person, which was really, spreading love, spreading peace, and educating, their message to people that wanted to be educated.
Yeah.
This book is a little different, and I'll never be beholden to an individual or an organization.
Yeah, Pope John Paul seemed to at least have good rhetoric. So another major thing too that I don't know if you know, well, Pope Francis is not the Pope. Did you know that?
I did not know that. Why do you say that?
So the real Pope is actually Ratzinger, the Pope who resigned, because
Yes.
under Vatican law, under the laws of the Catholic Church, a Pope cannot resign. They are always there for life. So the reason why I think Ratzinger stepped down is because he was about to be tried under a international court of law for pedophilia. He was trafficking young boys across the Catholic Church and selling them, which was a really nasty thing. And we see this Pope actually when they try to kiss his ring. Have you seen those videos?
I have not.
Well, if you look it up, the Pope doesn't let anyone kiss his ring because the only one who can do that is the real Pope.
Yeah, like I said, I was raised Catholic, and I'm not a practicing Catholic, and it's been a long time, so I'm not familiar with their doctrine, and I haven't seen that. So, I like I said, most Catholics, my father's still Catholic. They're in it for the right reason, but anytime someone accumulates that power, is always worrisome because anyone can abuse their power, as we've seen throughout history. So there are people that will do great things with their power, and there will be some that aren't
Right.
great.
Good versus evil.
Yes.
So this is really the number one question. Will you be holding these people accountable? Will you be holding these pedophiles accountable and putting them into prison, like these pedophile priests and the pedophile Pope?
Yeah, I think it's a tragedy that anybody who sweeps pedophilia or anything along those lines under the rug for whatever reason, that is just completely wrong and immoral. We see that there are groups like NAMBLA and other people that push, and they're pushing for more pedophilia style relationships, which is completely wrong. And it goes back to the thing that I said: you have the God-given right to do whatever you want with your life, as long as you don't take away that right from another.
Right.
If you take a young person and you force them into these relationships, or even if they think they are willing to go into this relationship. Their minds aren't mature enough. You're taking away their God-given right, and it's just wrong. And everyone who does anything along those lines should be punished.
This is one of the amazing things too, is that they're locking people up for small drug offenses when these people are committing heinous crimes against the people of the world and against God.
Yeah, you like I said, in America, you have two systems. You have, like we were talking about, you have the illegals that are coming here, and a lot of those people don't assimilate with the American values. But also, we've seen that in government, you have these politicians that don't get the same punishment that somebody else will. That's not a politician.
Right.
So it's not fair. Everybody knows it. Like if you have money and you have power, you're more likely to get off. Jussie Smollett, as a recent example, he's in the news right now. As he was off maybe because he had his connections. Everybody knows that he was guilty of that, but he used his influence with other people to get off. Same thing goes on around this world, and it's always gone on, and it's unjust, and it's something that we need to continue to address and do better at by making sure that people are held accountable for these crazy acts of violence and harming people, and not to go after people for an individual thing that is a harmless crime. If they want to do something, yeah, that's their choice, as long as they're not taking away that right from another.
Will you make abortion illegal in the United States?
So this is a state's issue, and I always say to this, it is an issue that is so split between people because of emotion. As I said, I was an executive in mental health. So my wife and I talked about this years ago, and I was bringing up things through a logic-based uh, talking point, and she said, "I understand what you're saying, but through an emotion, I can't I can't connect with you, and I'll never agree with your logic because of emotion." And it struck me, like, why would you think that? And then I really thought about a person's brain. Most people, you either use your left or right side of the brain. One's more logic based, one's more emotion based. So not everybody can look at an abortion in a logic based issue. They're going to look at it in an emotional issue. And emotion is stronger than logic. So what I always tell people is this is a state's issue, but what I think all Americans can agree on is that no late term abortion should happen and no federal funding for abortion should occur. And I say those two that just about everybody can agree, because late term abortion, everybody knows is wrong. That child is viable and that child can feel pain. So that's just wrong. And that's infanticide many times that we've been seeing, like with Virginia, with their legislation. But the second thing with federal funding, if you go with the premise that you have the God-given right to do what you want, provided you don't take away that right from another, federal funding for abortion is taking away someone who doesn't believe in it, because you're taking their money to do something that they find immoral. Most people can agree with those two things. I think what the heart of the issue comes down to is first trimester abortion. I'm not God. I don't know what the right answer is. I have my belief on what that is. But I think we start with rallying around those two things. We stop late term abortions and we don't force any funding for abortions.
Well, the major thing that I think about abortions is the number one rule of the government is to protect the weak, to protect the people. And I believe abortion is murder personally, and I think that it should be banned altogether. So how can you justify, how can you allow as a congressman abortion to continue and at least you not trying to completely stop it?
Well, so I'm not going to disagree with what you're saying there. But what I'm saying is it's a state's issue if you're based off the Constitution. I look at Roe v. Wade as incorrect ruling on that. So this is really going to go back to the states. It doesn't necessarily matter what I could do, because I think it would be against the Constitution to do anything else besides going back to the states. But what I can do is be that voice. But I think the first thing that needs to happen is that we have to rally around the fact that late-term abortions are wrong, and that federal funding for abortions is wrong. If we can get people to agree with those two things, once we become accustomed to those two things not happening, then we can address that first trimester. Yes, I think we've seen with Margaret Sanger, her purpose of creating Planned Parenthood and abortions was to wipe out the black race. There are evil intentions behind this, population control and things along those lines. But it's extremely hard to change a mindset and to change emotion unless you start to plant that seed. And I think the best way to do that is to address the late term abortion and the federal funding. Do that, I think we can address the first trimester within the next generation.
Why do you believe this is a state issue?
Because of my understanding of the Constitution, the way it was read, I'm not a constitutional scholar, but as from what I've read and before, it goes back to the states for a decision if it's not listed specifically in the Constitution.
Then why couldn't you try as a Congress member to make an amendment banning abortion? Is that something you would be willing to do? Is that something you would do as a Congress member if elected?
It's something I would definitely look into, but I don't have an issue with trying to pass that amendment or anything along those lines. I think to win the hearts and minds of people so that this doesn't even occur in back alleys or the secret abortions is to change the hearts and minds of people so they don't want to do this. And I think that, like I said, the way to do that is the parts where we can rally around the late term abortions and the federal funding. So, and then I said in a generation, because we've seen it. Let me back up a second. I'm 41 years old. So when I grew up, there wasn't really, the majority of the people seemed to be, let's say, pro-abortion. But as I've been aging, the new generation, the generations behind mine, have been more conservative and been more anti-abortion and more pro-life. And it's because it's a gradual move by planting that seed. So I don't have a problem, addressing or looking into any kind of amendment or any of the things right now. But I think to win the hearts and minds, that's what you need to do. I think that's more important than just regulating a law, because people will still break that law, as we've seen.
Well, yeah, I agree with you on some points, but I do disagree with a few things on that because I do believe it's a God-given right for life. But let's go on to another question.
Yeah.
So what do you think of Nancy Pelosi tearing up Trump's speech?
All right. Whether you love Trump or not, I always tell people this. He's a master at cinema and creating a narrative. So he knew how to get into the news and create this big name for himself. When the State of the Union started, I remember watching Nancy Pelosi in the back and her antics. And I said, what Trump is going to do is he's going to let her be a fool behind him. And he's going to get, in a sense, sympathy because people are going to see her acting foolishly back there. And then she topped it all off with ripping up that speech. I remember I just stood up after the speech and I was about to change the channel or something. And I saw her do it and I was like, I stopped. What it shows is that you have a party that is led by someone that doesn't look at being professional in that aspect as the way to behave. You have a party that is just so rampant with vitriol that it just makes them look bad. Now I've seen the post coming out about whether it's a violation of federal law or code. I'm not 100% sure if that's the case. It might be, but I think the damage is that so many people saw what she did and they're turned off by someone acting childishly just because they're not getting their way and they don't like the person that's the president. Now I wasn't a Barack Obama fan as well, but I still treated the office of presidency with respect, and I still would if I were elected to Congress and there were a different president. No matter what we see here in Maryland is out of touch Dutch does not work with this president because of his party bias. And who suffers for that? The people of Maryland. We don't get the industry or manufacturing jobs here because President Trump won't work with out of touch Dutch because out of touch Dutch won't work with him.
Yeah.
Work with any president. And what we're seeing with the left is they will not work with the other party. And that's why being a party person is wrong. You should be an American first.
So we see that Dutch, the current congressman for your district, has been the congressman there for over 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about term limits?
Completely for term limits. If anyone does any deeper research on Dutch, you'll realize he's been in office of some sort for 42 years, and it's like living under a king. So I've always supported term limits, and where we actually get a lot of resistance is from constitutional conservatives who say we have term limits by voting in the elections. But then I always said, well, if we have a term limit on the presidency, we should have a term limit also on House members and Senate and things like that. So it's either or, and I support term limits on all positions. So one of the things I brought forth is that there will be a 12-year maximum on serving in the Senate and the House. You can split it up either way. You can be Senate for 2 terms, which is 12 years. You can be Senate for one, and Congress for 3 terms, which is 12 years. That's pretty much a generation. That is plenty of time for somebody to be in office. We know that when someone amasses power, they will abuse it. So it's best in this day and age that we do not let people run amok in this system. When it was founded, the country needed people to run for office. So there were no things about term limits. It was after people started realizing that they could manipulate it and gain power that this really became a hot job and people really wanted to get into politics. But it wasn't that way when we were founded.
I really don't think term limits are the complete answer to this major problem, though. I really think it has to do with the voting. I think they are changing the votes. I think they're making the voting machines do it in their favor to decide the election. Because if they have the power over the voting booths, then they control political power forever. We have seen this happen in Venezuela. They were able to make their voting booths digital, and it's already coming into LA, Los Angeles, which has massive voter fraud. So, what will you do to stop voter fraud? And what will you do if you do lose this election to this guy Dutch? Will you try to investigate for voter fraud?
So yeah, voter fraud does happen, and we know that. So what needs to happen first is we need to investigate first the people behind the machines and that are involved with the whole voting system. We need to make sure there's no connection with these companies and people because we've seen it before. They own the machines, and then all of a sudden their candidate wins. Somehow this needs to be changed. We need to make sure we have a more uniform voting system because we have people. Sometimes I go in and it's a handwritten ballot. Sometimes I go in and it's electronic. Most people, the layman, doesn't know what's going on. There's always shenanigans. Then we're always finding about people with ballots in their trunk, and then it seems like the left always finds extra votes at the very end when they need them. It doesn't really happen as much when somebody on the right ends up needing votes and they end up winning. So yeah, these things need to be investigated, but I think we need to make sure there's no connection or correlation between these people who make these machines are behind the voting stuff, and then we need to make sure that the government entities don't push uh, the voter registration as well with the DMV and motor vehicles, because we see it many times. People go in, they're like, "Oh, would you like to vote?" And there, of course, some people are illegal, and then I've seen it firsthand. Oh yeah, would you like to vote for Dem? Would you like to register to vote as a Democrat? And so they lead with that. And there's those little mind games. They do add up. Obviously, we know that people are dead and they're still voting somehow.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we're going through each state and purging these voter rolls. I think it needs to be a severe penalty for anyone caught or any state that's behind any of these shenanigans, and if they're doing anything of the sort, because what they're doing is not just hurting, the candidate. They're hurting the American people that have the freedom and the responsibility to vote. All those things need to be addressed. If I lost the election, if there were any indication that there was something going on, yeah, I definitely would push for an investigation. Right now, I don't. There's no belief that that would happen. The first thing I need to do is get through the primary, and that's on April 28th. So that's my main focus. But yeah, I call out, and if people know me, they know I call out. I call it as it is. So if there's something that looks suspicious, I'm going to raise attention to it.
Will you break up the big tech giants?
Yeah, I think that I'm against monopolies and these the businesses that just become conglomerates, and then they abuse their power as a theme of this whole conversation. When they amass that power, they start to abuse it. and we see it happening with many of these tech giants as well. I think we need to look at our antitrust laws, monopoly laws, and that kind of stuff. We need to make sure that you're not getting these massive power grabs that are controlling the country. We need to make sure that power goes back to the people. So yeah, I completely would support that.
So, what steps are you taking to become Congressman of District 2 in Maryland?
Yeah. So, as I said earlier, Maryland is the Republicans are a weak minority in this state, and I saw firsthand that many of the Republicans here just wanted to hold on to that little bit of power they had, and I
Yes.
knew that wasn't going to work in order to win in a state like Maryland. This district used to be a conservative district until it was gerrymandered to allow Dutch to get in office. And so I knew that my numbers really were hard, and I was going to have to win over the hearts and minds of many non-conservatives. So what I decided to do was run around the country, building up support and building a name and getting a national following. So when I came back to Maryland, the people said, okay, this guy, he's been around, he's spoken with some influential people, he's got some connections, he can help us. What I did was I crafted my message specifically with the whole mindset what we talked about were emotion and logic, which was based on four things. These were the rallying points of both anyone on the left or the right. And it's simply this: uh, putting Americans first. And a lot of liberals and socialists will say they don't support that, but yes, they do. Because I've had many socialists or I've had many liberals that don't stand for anything that I stand for. They say they're going to support me because they know I want to put their kids first because their kids can't get into preschool because an illegal kid got that spot before them.
Right.
So putting Americans first is a rallying point for both sides. Understanding that we have to expose and end the corruption is the same thing. Left and right can agree on that. Three, fixing our schools. Both sides can agree we need to do better for our children. And we can get into the topics where the money's going to the school systems, but the money's really not going down to the pupil or the child. What's going on there? It's all part of the corruption. We can expose that and fix that. And then lastly, bringing back real jobs, bringing back manufacturing or high-tech jobs, jobs that pay. Both sides can agree with that. Now, I am conservative, so in the conversations, I don't shy away from it. But the message that I need to do was say, here's 4 points that both sides can agree with. And if you're disenfranchised and you've had enough of the socialist movement of that left wing, what do you have to lose? Vote for me. Vote for Tim Fazenbaker. You know that I have your interest at heart, and I'm just like one of you. That message has been resonating so much. This seat has been considered a possible flip compared to before when it was a huge Democrat block. It's a possible flip now because many people are seeing it's not about a party, it's about an American ideology, and then conservatism will triumph with our results.
Now, I have came up with this idea, and some other people support it as well. So, do you think it would be better to get the schooling better? The way to get it better would be giving these kids the whatever $20,000 credit to be used on schooling only, so it can be more competitive with either private schooling or homeschooling, because really all these people want in the public schools is the money. They take it and then they want to do as little as possible.
Yeah. So I've always been a supporter of vouchers or a school choice system. And I have a 6 plan that's on my website, timfazenbaker.com. I have a 6 point plan on addressing education. And what we see is, yes, people get into that power and they want to keep that money and they want to push for more money. And Baltimore City, which is a terribly ran school system, the the head of the school system just got renewed her contract. I believe it was a lady for $325,000, which is it's astronomical for a school system that is that poor. Um, let alone even if it were a strong school system, the children in Baltimore City they get more per student than just about every single other city or locality out in the country. I think they're the third highest per student, yet they have some of the worst results because that money doesn't get to the child. So we need to let the families and the children have the school choice, take a voucher, whether it's going to a different school or they're getting homeschooled, or I've always been a proponent of tele-education. So if it's best that you're doing some kind of homeschooling through through
Like the Ron Paul.
yeah, like a telecommunication style, whatever's best. But the thing is also that not every kid has to be pushed in a cookie cutter method where, okay, you're going to learn these things and go to school. What needs to happen is we need to study and make sure we push American with American education, history, English, language, math, and science. And I'm a product of public school, and I really benefited from music. So, and I became a musician because of that. But at the same time, those four core elements need to be pushed more than other things like music and schooling. If we have the funding for that, that's great. But when we're failing with the core principles of education, that's wrong. The whole system needs to be changed around, and it's abused, just like with government, just like with a lot of corporations. It needs to be overhauled.
Will you abolish the Federal Reserve and the federal income tax?
Yeah, I would love to do both of those. Obviously, they are huge undertakings to do. The income tax, many people don't know that we didn't have a federal income tax for the first half of our nation. I support the gold standard. Many things have happened, and we don't know exactly. We have inklings of what happened. But bottom line is, I would love a consumption tax where nobody gets taxed in your paycheck or anything along those lines. But yet, whenever you purchase something, there would be a tax. I could go for this because what that means is if you're an illegal in this country, you're going to pay tax when you buy something. If
Yeah.
if you're a tourist, you're going to pay. And if for the people on the left who say the evil rich people, well, the rich people do spend more money, so they're going to spend more in taxes when they buy their yachts or whatever it's going to be. And I think there shouldn't be tax thing on necessities like food and maybe some clothing and stuff. But ultimately, our tax system is rigged against the American person. You have half the country that doesn't pay tax. You have the other half of the country that does.
Right. It's
You can
rich.
you can vote your way into you can vote your way into getting more freebies from the government. But what I like about a consumption tax is if the American government or any government is really infringing the rights upon Americans, we have a way to rebel and say, you know what, we're just not going to buy these extra things. America, you're not going to have the money coming in because we won't give it to you. We'll keep the necessities. There won't be a tax on that. But then the government has to find a way to either change its behavior or find that revenue in another way.
So we see this current Congressman Dutch. I don't see him going into the inner city communities and knocking on doors and asking the people for their vote. Is this something you'll do? Will you go into the inner cities and go into these neighborhoods and ask these people for their votes?
Yes, I've been doing that. A third of my district, and demographic wise, I believe, is black. Majority is white, and we have a large Jewish population as well here. What we do is we spread our message, and I've worked with groups like Blexit, blacks exiting the Democrat Party.
All
Walk
right.
away. I have Brandon Straka is a friend of mine. He's coming into town to help with these same things. We're trying to do a black town hall on March 8th because we want these people to say, we want them to represent what they truly believe and not be tied into a party. So yeah, I go into these neighborhoods. I support other candidates that are conservative running in these districts. Black conservatives, they're there, and they face um, a different fight than what say I would, because they're going in there and people are calling them a traitor and how can they do this, and they think Republicans are racist and why are you a black guy running as a Republican. I go in with them, and there's one thing that I've learned that really opens the eyes of people that are so far to the left, yet they are conservative, but they
Yeah.
always are left. And it's a simple thing, and I learned it in the inner city at one of these rallies. They said, why would we vote for a Republican when they're racist? And I was like, well, I disagree. I don't think we're racist. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt just for this conversation. Maybe they are. But I said, do you believe that Democrats take you for granted? Yes. Do you believe that Republicans want you right now? Yes. then why don't you come in our party and take it over? As soon as I say that, their eyes open and they realize the power they have by switching and becoming a Republican. Now, I don't want them to bring the liberal philosophies with them to our party, but most of these people are conservative in nature. They just vote
Yeah.
as they vote for a liberal party.
Right.
Welcome them to come to our party, participate, and take it over. That way they have power. They don't feel like they have power right now. And that's what I do. I go in there and I spread the message all about communication and speaking one-on-one with people. And I don't treat them any differently. I don't say, because you're black, I'm going to talk to you differently. No, you're an American, and I'm going to talk to you like you're an American. And that resonates with people. I don't like identity politics.
Can you tell the viewers how they can find you and how they can help you with your campaign?
Yeah, thank you for that. You can find me at timfazenbaker.com. Last name's Fazenbaker. Facebook, you can find me at Fazenbaker for Congress. On Twitter, America One Tim Faze. I always need people to spread the message. Social media is a way where we talked about a little earlier. I don't necessarily need to raise all that money because there are other innovative ways to get out the message, and social media is one. So I ask everybody, share the messages. That's a way to spread what we're trying to do. And also, we always do need money to help with all kinds of our operations. We're expecting huge attacks from Dutch. So you can always donate to me. Everything's on the website as well. I appreciate all the support from anybody. And if we disagree on anything, just understand I always will support the American people, and I will fight for you even if we have disagreements. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Tim, for being on the Free American Press and telling the viewers about yourself. And I hope you can beat this guy, Dutch, who is an abortionist and supports all these bad policies.
Yeah.
So thanks. Thank you.
I appreciate that very much. And as always, American kids first.
We'll have you on the show soon.
Thanks.
Okay.